Welcome to the Climbing the Charts podcast. I'm Angie Lawless, and I'm here with my co-host, Brandon Miller.
Today, we are honored and very excited to have Sherry Deutschmann join us on Climbing the Charts.
Yay.
We have read that your origin story begins as a single mom without a college degree who was cleaning really wretched bathrooms.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, however, and Sherry Deutschmann is a leading light in Nashville, especially in its entrepreneurial community. She is an author, a sought-after speaker, and has created and sold a major company. More about that later. She may be best known now, though, as the founder and CEO of BrainTrust, which was started in 2019, and which we will also learn more about in a bit. Sherry, I think it's fair to say, is a fixture in the Nashville community as a board member and advisor for many of Music City's highest-profile organizations and nonprofits, including the Chamber of Commerce, the Entrepreneur Center, Scale Up, and Thistle Farms, to name just a few. She is also a former Nashville Next Entrepreneur of the Year, is a graduate of Leadership Nashville, and was named a White House Champion of Change by President Obama.
I had forgotten some of those things, so thanks for reminding me.
Look how impressive you are.
And then thinking about the wretched bathrooms, I've never heard anybody describe it that way. But y'all, I was cleaning, I had a route with my sister where we cleaned gas station restrooms.
Oh.
So wretched is right.
It's a good word.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Do you remember what that paid per bathroom?
I think it was $5 a stall.
Great.
So,
Great.
And we had to do it as quickly as possible and, go on to the next. Yeah.
Oh, man, I hope you got gas
Not
money.
glamorous.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show, Sherry. Sherry's a member of EO with me, and also, as Brandon mentioned, started BrainTrust, of which I'm a member.
And what is EO, for people that may not know?
EO is a membership-based organization globally for entrepreneurs, and they put us together in small groups, and we just help each other grow our businesses. And you go on a retreat once a year. So my group just had our retreat last week, and it was transformational. I am fired up. I've got new enthusiasm and zest for life and for my business today.
Where'd you go?
We went to Punta Cana. We rented a house that had 8 king bedrooms, and we didn't leave the property. I think the guys went to play golf one day, but otherwise we were going over the book, 10X is easier than 2X. Have y'all read that?
Mm-mm.
Don't start it, but at bedtime, because you will not be able to sleep. And so we're each figuring how to 10X our businesses instead of the 2X, and we've been doing.
That is exciting.
It was great.
Well, I'm excited, Sherry. I think that you are vulnerable and real. It's really great to have a conversation with you. So I'm excited to get into these questions.
All right. Because this is Music City, we like to start out with an easy one. In the words of Chris Stapleton, what are you listening to?
Oh, okay. So I am, mostly I listen to CNN, which is not that healthy right now. It'll drive you crazy, but I'm obsessed with Brandi Carlile.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
There is a recording of her on Howard Stern singing The Joke 5 years ago. Y'all, it is haunting. I dare you to listen to that song without getting cold chills and even crying.
Wow.
And I've heard several renditions. She sang it for the Grammys several years ago and brought down the house. But she is my current obsession. Yeah.
Yes.
And Chris Stapleton too. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Anything those two do.
He's got a new album.
Yeah. Well, so tell us a little about yourself prior to becoming, kind of the strong businesswoman that you are today. Tell us a little bit about who Sherry was prior to that.
Well, I grew up in the mountains of North Carolina, a little town called Banner Elk, and it was just a city of the haves and the have-nots, really. Very, very few people in the middle. My family are all Jehovah's Witnesses, and so I grew up in a very, very sheltered environment, and Jehovah's Witnesses, especially at the time, did not encourage college education. So you get married young. There's also no premarital sex of any kind, and so you go right into getting married and having babies. So I got married at 18, very innocent, very naive, and was cleaning houses and scrubbing toilets. I had just a high school education from Newland, North Carolina, and no real skills or anything other than toilet scrubbing. I do think I'm really good at that. And just kind of sheltered and naive was who I was. I also was delusional enough to think that I was going to be a star. And so I left the Jehovah's Witness faith and left my family and moved to Nashville with my little girl, just to thinking I was going to come here and get a record deal overnight. And you know that didn't happen.
So you're a singer.
I thought I was a singer. And it's like anything, is if you don't practice it, you lose it. And I think I was mediocre then, solidly mediocre, and I'm pretty sub-mediocre now.
And
How old were you when you moved to Nashville?
I was 25.
Wow. 25. She's still just a baby.
I was.
And
A
how old was
baby
your
with a
little
baby.
girl?
She was 3.
Oh, man.
And we didn't know a soul in this town. We had no money. I think I had paid my first month's rent, and then I had less than $200 to my name. And, I found out pretty quickly I wasn't going to get a record deal. And then I'd heard that you could get a free car to drive if you sold cars. So I went and got a job at Beam & Lincoln Mercury. It was on 8th Avenue South. I think there's an apartment building there right now. But that was my first job when I came to Nashville.
Wow. And so then how did you get from there to eventually starting Letter Logic in your basement?
Well, the background of being a Jehovah's Witness was a really good foundation for sales and learning to handle rejection. In fact, when I went to Beam & Lincoln Mercury to ask for a job, the general manager asked me, what do you know about cars? And I said, not much. And he said, what do you drive? And I had to point out the window to my Volkswagen Rabbit diesel that had rolled off a mountain and that I'd paid $1 for. So it was dented. It was like the ugliest car you've ever seen. And he just shook his head and he said, this is a really tough business. Can you handle rejection? And I said, oh, yes, sir, I can. I've been a Jehovah's Witness knocking on doors since I was like 9 years old. And he said, okay, you're hired. But promise me you'll never park that piece of shit car on this driveway again. And I said, yes, sir. So got my first job there, started dating my boss, which you shouldn't do. And so I had to leave and find another job. And I ended up, in a sales career. And the first couple of years were brutal. Couldn't afford daycare and the light bill. And so often my daughter and I didn't have electricity in our apartment. And sometimes that was as long as 2 weeks before my next pay period so that I could, pay the light bill and scrimp by. And we lived like that for a couple of years. And then I started doing really well in sales and making money. And bought a house and bought a car. And then the company that I was working for was in the healthcare revenue cycle space. We printed and mailed hospital bills. And I was the sole salesperson, and we were acquired. And after the acquisition, our service just really suffered. I would sell a new account, and we would lose 2 accounts. And I had become friends with all of our customers. You know how that is in sales, and you develop deep relationships with them. And I was in a position where all I did every day was apologize to my friends. Brutal. And so I started to try to figure out for myself why we were losing customers and why our service was so poor. And I realized pretty quickly that it was simply because most everything was simple, careless mistakes. And the root of the problem was that my coworkers didn't care. And then the epiphany was they didn't care because nobody cared about them. And they knew it. And I thought about how little I was cared for, and I was the rainmaker there. I was bringing in 100% of the revenue, and yet I was ignored and mistreated. And I'd read the book, which I think everybody should read, Nuts, about how Herb Kelleher started Southwest Airlines with his belief that if he put the staff first, so the flight attendants were happy and the pilots were happy, then the passengers would be treated well and would be happy and they'd be loyal. And man, that was just like a light bulb went off. And I literally ran to my boss and said, oh my gosh, I've got this whole thing figured out. If we could just do this, this, and this, then, we could solve all of our problems and we wouldn't lose customers anymore. And he reached across the table and patted my hand and said, Sherry, you don't know anything about business. Why don't you just go sell something?
How old were you at this point?
I was 30. I think I was 38 at this point. So, several years had gone by in various sales jobs. And I was hurt first and then really angry. And what he didn't know was that 2 weeks before that, a local businessman had taken me to lunch and said, I've watched what you've done with that company, and I think you should leave them. And I think you should start your own business competing with them. And I was like, whoa. And so he told me what he would pay me. Well, at this time, I was making good six figures, and he offered me a $35,000 salary. He would fund the company, $35,000 salary, and he would let me earn up to 5% of the business. But even with my high school math, I didn't think that was a really good deal for me. So I said
That's
no.
a Shark Tank reject.
Yes. And so but man, it planted a seed.
Planted a seed, yeah.
I was like, what? If he thinks I've got the goods, maybe I do. And so when my boss, treated me so cavalierly, then I left and I went down to the bookstore and I bought every book I could about writing a business plan. Because I'd never even read one. And here I was thinking, I've got to write one. I'm going to start competing with him. And so I came up with a business plan and decided I needed $350,000 to start the company. And so I went to a couple of customers, and one was a big software company. And I went to a couple of other larger customers that were that owned hospitals and said, I'm going to do this, and I want you to back me. And unbelievably, all five said yes. All five agreed to give me the seed capital that I needed, although I didn't know the term seed capital. I didn't even know the word entrepreneur. And yet, when I told them how I wanted to run the company, there was a lot of pushback. And so I just said no to everybody because I told them I wanted an employee-centric company. I wanted to follow what Herb Keller had done. Mm-hmm. And so I just told everybody no. And at that time, I had a nice house on Leland Lane in Green Hills. And it was sitting up the top of the hill. And I had a week-long yard sale. And I cashed in my 401k and had a week-long yard sale and sold everything I owned. Everything. And I did not get $350,000 for all that. But I got enough to get the company off the ground. And I'd sold so much that I didn't even have a desk. So I had to go to Goodwill. And I bought these two, the short filing cabinets that have two drawers. I bought two of those. And there was an old door in the basement. And I put that over the filing cabinets. And that became my desk. And I had the idea of a really employee-centric culture. And I'd had the sales proposition. So there were some guys at the time who operated out of Hillsborough Village. And what they would do is help you with your business plan. And if it was good enough, then they would invest. And so I took my business plan to them. And they said, yeah, you're not going anywhere with this. There's nothing here. There's nothing special except your knowledge of the industry. That's all you've got. And you've got to have something that sets you apart. And so I didn't even sleep for about 3 days thinking about what problem could I solve in the healthcare industry that would make it a no-brainer for people to trust me in my basement to take care of their patient statements. And I came up with that idea. And I called Methodist Hospital Memphis was the first call I made. And I talked to the CFO, and his exact words was, that is a quintessential no-brainer. Yes, you can have our business. I was like, oh my gosh. And then from there, every hospital that I called said yes.
And so the unique idea or the difference maker being putting the employees first?
No, it was something else. It had to have a direct effect on them. And I didn't even realize at the time how putting the employees first would affect my ability to sell. That came later. But at the time, hospitals had 15% of the mail they mailed out was returned to them undeliverable because they had a bad address for the patient. And they didn't know how to get a good address for the patient. So what they did was just turn it over to a collection agency. So you've got an angry patient who never got a bill, and now they get collection letters.
Right.
And so, and then they had to give 30 to 40% to the collection agency for getting the money. So it was just bad all the way around. And so I found a service that the FBI was using to track down people. And we just would send all of our addresses through that system first. And so we would not print on the envelope the address that the hospitals gave us. We would print the address that the FBI says is where that person lives now, and then feed the new addresses back to the hospital. And then that was so effective that I told the hospitals, I'll buy back every piece of mail that comes back to you. So if I send 1,000 statements and 150 come back, I'll just buy them back. So you're not going to lose anything. And that's what they were saying. The quintessential no-brainer was. But we were able to eliminate so much of the return mail that they didn't even want to count the return mail to get the refund.
Wasn't worth it.
It wasn't worth it to them. And they got what they wanted, which was getting the patient statement in the patient's hands quick enough. And we were the only company ever to do anything like that. And that became our calling card. But then our culture was one where I believed in paying a real fair living wage and paying for 100% of everybody's medical, dental, disability, and life insurance. And in the first 4 or 5 years, we paid for the employees' families' insurance at 100% too.
Wow.
And then we let them bring their kids and their pets to work anytime they wanted to. So if there was a snow day, the place was kids, and they were all hanging with me. But we also helped them buy their first house with a gift toward the down payment or closing costs. And then in the best business idea I ever had was every month bringing all the employees together and going over the financials with them and telling them exactly how much money we made that month. So how much money we brought in and how much profit we made. And then we would take 10% of the profit, no matter what it was, and split it evenly. So our CFO got the same thing our janitor got. Everybody got exactly the same dollar amount. And the purpose was letting everybody know that they were critical, just as critical as anyone else, in the results to the bottom line, and made everybody work together more, made them respect one another more, made them mindful of what drove profit and what, where they could cut costs. And it just made us a lot more profitable.
Do you remember what your turnover rate was?
It was very low. So we had a higher turnover rate in the IT department, but in the factory where you would expect it to be higher, you couldn't get rid of people. In fact, there was an article about us in the New York Times because our culture was so revolutionary. Mm-hmm. The New York Times did an article, and from that, a man came knocking on the door and said, I want to work here, and I'll work here free. I just want to work in this type of environment. Oh. And I said, well, I couldn't let you work here free and be true to what I'm saying we're doing, so wait till I can afford you. And it was 6 months or so before I could afford to bring him in to actually run the facility, and he stayed with me till the day I sold. It was just, and he took whatever shift nobody else wanted, he took because he believed in what we were doing. But the weird thing, y'all, was when it was really big hospital presentations. So our clients were people like Dignity Health in California, Stanford University Medical Center, Bon Secours up in Virginia, big healthcare systems. I would go with the sales team at first and sit with the people around their board rooms and say, we want your business, but I need you to know 2 things. 1, we're the most expensive in the industry, so if you're cost sensitive, don't waste your time talking to us. And 2, we don't believe the customer comes first. And then they would look at me like, did she mean what she said? And then I'll say, we don't believe the customer comes first. My employees come first. But I take such good care of them that when they're at work, they are totally focused on you. And they're not having to worry about their light bills or their medical bills. They know all that's taken care of. And so they just concentrate on giving you the best service you've ever had, which is why you're going to be happy to pay us more than you've ever paid before, because you're never going to experience service like this again. And so, we had one big healthcare system who wrote us a letter and said, you were 10% higher than the highest bid, than the next highest bid. And we still chose you because we want to experience that culture. And so our sales team said 85% of our business is a culture sale. And that, I did not expect that. I wasn't using it to bring people in. I was using it because I thought it was the right thing to do and that it would yield the results. But I didn't think it would be a sales tool. And that became a really powerful sales tool. I mean, telling customers, you don't come first, was a sales tool. It was incredible.
We all want what we can't have.
Yeah. So that enabled us to grow from my basement to my living room, and then to taking over my whole house. And then we got to $1.5 million in revenue in about 12 months. And then I went back to the bank and asked for the $350,000 that I was stuck on that number. And they said, no, you're not bankable yet, but we know a man. And they took me to see Lucius Birch, who is a venture capitalist and over in Belmead. And I sat with Lucius for about 30 minutes, and he said, give her the money. So I had the money the next day, and Lucius became my partner and co-owner of BrainTrust and of Letter Logic, and that helped me grow that company. We grew it to $40 million a year, and we grew it fast enough that we were on the Inc. 5000 list, the list of fastest growing U.S. companies, for 10 straight years, which was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And y'all, we did it with no debt.
So what did the growth trajectory look like? You sort of spike up to, 1.5 million in a year or so. And then did it kind of keep
was it
like that?
This, or was it
Straight up.
Straight up.
Yeah. There was never a down year. It was just a steady climb constantly.
Just like us, Brandon.
Well, we chose what I didn't know it at the time. Y'all, this was a very low margin, highly commoditized industry. I had no idea because I didn't know any of those terms or anything.
You don't even know what margin is.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
But I found out later, this is not really that great a business model. But, we did really well at it. And it turned out to be I was fortunate that in the beginning, I tried to lease equipment and the leasing companies wouldn't lease to me. I tried to, buy equipment and I couldn't get the financing for that. And so I hired MacGyver. His name was Paul Profit. And he was, okay, the young people don't know who MacGyver is, but
I remember MacGyver. I watched a lot of MacGyver as a kid.
Yeah.
So this guy could fix anything. He could fix anything. And so we bought just crappy old equipment and he kept it running like a top. And so we paid cash for everything all along the way. We just paid cash, which was a beautiful thing when I went to sell the company and I had no debt.
Yeah.
It was a really nice payday.
Right. You had nothing. That's amazing. And MacGyver sounds like he's definitely worth whatever he got paid. That's awesome.
Yeah. He
How
was
many
amazing.
employees did you have at the height?
At one point we had 63, but that was also a time where the company was not making money. We weren't as profitable. And so that monthly meeting where we would distribute checks for the profit share, there were 2 months in a row where we had no profit. And it was because I was trying to turn us into a tech company. I was trying to make it so we would send the patients their bills electronically and receive the payment for the hospitals electronically. And we were, far behind everybody else in the industry. And I just spent a ton of money chasing that shiny object until I realized that, I should just be the very best at the paper side of it and not worry about that and partner with other people and right-sized us. And so I didn't want to let anybody go, but I pulled them all together and said, hey, we're going to let go of that and we're going to focus on this. And so it was mostly code writers who wanted the sexy work of building out the tech company that just left. And so when I sold the company, we were at 51 employees and have been there for a couple of years. That's a long answer to a short question.
That's great.
But that's
That's
really
super
interesting to
interesting,
know
yeah.
that you had that, because I think, whether it's boredom or fear or whatever the emotions are, I think often we're like, try to be everything to everybody and figure it out. And time again, the story is find your niche and be the very best in that
And I think
niche.
as we were kind of talking before we went on air, there's lots of cycles in the business. The business cycles there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, and the key to surviving is figuring out how to navigate those ups and downs. And those are the things that our listeners, I think, really, those nuggets of wisdom find really valuable and important. It's been a tough. I think the last year has been a tough market for a lot of people. A lot of people in different industries. So it's a great perspective.
I had a man that came in to work with me just 18 months. He was really a fixer or somebody who helped troubled companies, and we weren't in trouble, but he was bored and he said, I'll help you. I'll stay a maximum of 18 months. And in just a few weeks, he said, Sherry, I see what your problem is. And the reason you've started losing money is that you're chasing two rabbits, and the man who chases two rabbits catches neither. And you've gone away from what made you so successful. So y'all were undisputably the best on the paper side of this. And you're chasing something that you can never be. You can never catch up to where the tech companies are. And you've just forgotten. So let go of all that. Quit chasing the shiny object. And his thing was major in the majors. And so he's why I changed focus, and I'm so glad I did when I did.
Yeah. Well, so at what point did you start thinking about selling? And then also tell us some lessons that you learned from the sale of Letter Logic that you would apply today if you were selling another company.
Wow. I wasn't planning on selling the company. At that point, we were making good money and dividends were nice. But with this man's help, he really was brilliant. He was with me just 18 months, but we quadrupled EBITDA in 18 months. And so if you are looking to sell a company, it was just the ideal time.
By this point, you knew what EBITDA was.
I did know what EBITDA was. And what he did for us, as he came in, he did a company valuation. And he taught us in the senior leadership team how to do a mini valuation, which we did every Monday and every Thursday. And I think you would not think that a company's value would change a couple of times a week, but it did. If we sold a new customer that was a high margin customer, and we had recurring revenue from that, we could project the valuation change.
Wow.
But if we lost somebody, and it could be a smaller customer that had a higher margin, we could also project the change to the valuation. And so it just made us start thinking differently. And at the same time, my teenage granddaughter, when she was 12 or 13, came to live with us. And I knew I needed to be more present for her. And so it just seemed like the right time. That article in the New York Times about us got other press, and we had been featured in several magazines. So a lot of companies had called trying to buy us. And so I knew there would be what they call a frothy market. Right. There would be lots of interest and lots of offers. And it was really the right time. And you know what I didn't know that I learned through the process, I didn't know we were acquired by a PE firm. And I didn't know very naively that the role of a private equity firm is not to build a great company. It's to maximize the value for their investors. And
you hear the term extract value a lot in the PE space.
Extract is the right word. Because the first thing they did, they blew a lot of smoke to me about how much they loved the culture. But the first thing they did was do away with a profit share. So we had an all-cash deal. I told the employees on a Monday that I had sold the company, and the next Monday was my last day with them. It was a rough week.
Yeah.
Very sad. But I put a couple of $1 million into the firm that they were creating, and that got me a board seat. And I got to see behind the curtain and to see, how private equity works. And it was just eye-opening. And for a long time, I thought, they're evil. They're not evil. I just didn't understand their motivation and goals.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wish that I'd known that. I wish that I'd known more about how that whole world worked.
Might you have found a different suitor at a lower cost? Or
Maybe. But I think I would have negotiated maybe better for myself at that time and for my employees. Mm-hmm. So they lost more than half the employees in the first 90 days because the culture changed so dramatically.
I think that's pretty common. I mean, that seems to happen a lot. When I was a kid, my dad's company got acquired by KKR, which was a big, private equity firm. And there's a lot of positives. There's a lot of positives, but I do think it dramatically changes firm culture, and just understanding the economic incentives are very different.
Very. So that was really eye-opening for me.
that had to be a pretty terrible time too, right? Because when those people were leaving, you put your heart and soul into kind of making sure that they were prepared for their future and that they had everything wrapped around them. And then you sell it thinking that they're protected, and now they're kind of stripped of a lot and they are on their own.
Well, I had never heard of an ESOP, an employee-owned company, until maybe our company was 8 or 9 years old, and it was suggested that we become an ESOP. And I looked into that, but at that time, the valuation of the company was out of the grasp of the employees. There was just not really a way to make it happen. And so I felt like I'm paying them great wages, and the profit share checks had gotten to be over $1,000 a month. And so if you're making $25 an hour and every month there's an extra $1,000,
Yeah.
That can really help a lot. But I took 15% of the sales price and I gave that to the employees when I sold the company. So, and that was based on how long they'd been with the company. So
they had something that probably allowed them to leave as well, because they had something to hold on to get them through to find the next.
yes.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So they all got a big chunk. I know there was one young woman who'd only been with us a couple of years, and I think she got $35,000, and she had saved up all of her profit sharing checks, and she went and paid off her parents' mortgage with her money. So that was like one of the best things that ever happened to me. Her story.
Yeah.
So does the company is it still in existence now? Kind of what's happened to? Do you follow it, or is it kind of one of those things like this was my baby, and I know that's something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, because they often want to build a business to sell it, but it's also it's their baby, and that's just a really hard thing to do. So I was just curious, like, what was it like, after you sold it, and is it still around, or is what's sort of happened?
They merged us with a few other companies in that space that they had bought, and now they are, I think, the largest in the industry. It's called RevSpring, the company that it became. And it's a very well-run, very well-respected company. I think probably valued at well over $1 billion now. And their headquarters are here in Nashville.
Okay.
So
that's a win.
Yeah, and some of my employees who are on the senior leadership team are still there. So of course I keep in touch with all of them, and I hear and they're happy, and they've had a few events, so they've all made a lot of money, and they're happy and well taken care of now.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
That's awesome.
Okay. So, and I guess, you've sort of touched on it interestingly, but that was going to be one of my questions, is you sort of speak to empathy as being a guiding force for you. And I think for you in business, clearly, how can a PE firm or a publicly owned company kind of bring some of that in, along with their goal being maximizing, shareholder profit?
And maybe the question is, can
they? Yeah.
I think they can. I have a book that I wrote about this experience and about the power of empathy. And in that book, I even suggest that Walmart could make a lot more money, because I think, especially at that time, I haven't been in a Walmart in a while, but you could go in and see several people around the cash register, but nobody really working, and they were complaining about their jobs the whole time. And I thought they could have a third fewer employees
If they were all working.
if they were all working and cared, but they weren't paid enough to care.
If you look at Costco versus Sam's Club
Exactly.
and Walmart, there's a very interesting case study that it basically suggests that exact outcome.
I write about exactly that. And
this is in Lunch with Lucy?
Yes, my book, Lunch with Lucy. Which Lunch with Lucy in Letter Logic, every Wednesday, the lunch hour was spent with an employee, and they would invite me to lunch, and we would go to a restaurant of their choice, and we would talk about them. And that Lunch with Lucy, I was Lucy, became the most important time I spent growing my company, because I got to hear about their lives and their problems, their goals, their hopes and dreams. And that helped me be a more empathic leader, because I could see the world through their lens and see what they were having to deal with on the money that I was paying them. So I think that even for a public company, I think there's data now to show that companies that have a mission, that have the greater good as part of their mission statement, are actually more profitable. I forget the term, that cause-based, or is that what it is? Cause-based marketing, or
Yeah. I know
but
what you're talking about.
they're much more profitable because they attract a customer that's willing to pay more for their goods and services because of the good that they're extracting at the end. And so, yes, I believe even public companies could be more successful if they were more transparent, if they were more open, if they saw the world through the lens of their employees. And I won't quit thinking that till I die.
Yeah, here we go. Cause marketing is marketing done by a for-profit business that seeks to both increase profits and a better society.
Exactly. And I think the data is showing that those companies are more profitable and more sustainable because they attract the right kind of customer.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Okay, so bringing this forward a little bit, so you sold Letter Logic in 2016 and then started your new venture, BrainTrust, in 2019. BrainTrust's website describes the company or organization as a membership organization for women business owners dedicated to ensuring they have an equal opportunity to build financial independence, wealth, and influence. So tell us a little bit about BrainTrust as well as the origin of the name.
Nobody's ever asked me that, so thank you. As you stated when we started out here, that Angie and I are both members of EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, and it was critical to me in helping me grow my business acumen, because it puts you in a group with several other entrepreneurs, and you meet once a month with in total confidentiality, and bring your problems and your challenges and your opportunities to the table, and you help each other with those. And every time I would meet a woman entrepreneur or any entrepreneur, I would just say, you need to join EO. And I'd find out that they couldn't, because only 7% of male-owned businesses qualify for EO, because you have to get to $1 million in revenue. And that's hard to believe, and only 7% of male-owned businesses get there.
That's
but
hard to believe.
only 2% of women-owned businesses ever get there. And so at the time, I was mentoring 23 women, and I'm a terrible mentor, because all I want to do is solve your problem for you, and that's not the way to mentor. And then I realized that they were all smarter than me, and so I couldn't help them with knowledge, but I could put them together in groups so they could start doing what we do in EO together, and that would help many of them, fly right past the $1 million mark, I thought. And then I thought, well, as soon as they hit $1 million, then they can go join EO or WPO for women, the Women's Presidents Organization. So I started with that in mind, just helping more women reach that point. And now we have about 180 members in Nashville, and over 30% of them have flown right past $1 million. So now we're attracting women that are whose revenue is much greater. We're attracting women who have 10 million, 15 million, 25 million who want to be part of this organization. And through reading the 10X book that I just mentioned, the Dan Sullivan book, I just had the epiphany this week that that's really what we're doing. We're 10Xing these entrepreneurs so they can 10X their companies. And it's working. It is absolutely working. And so now in our 10X, this feels like a commercial for 10X, doesn't it?
I know, I'm putting it right now in my Audible.
We're choosing our expansion cities now.
Awesome.
So we hope to have this be a global company that's helping women everywhere.
I remember first, I was in a networking group. I remember one of the people in it as a friend, and I remember her telling me that she was going to be leaving it because she was going to join this thing called BrainTrust. Because she's like, Sherry's doing it, so I can't not do it. And it may be a big time commitment, but I think it's worth it. That was Judith Hill, so shout out to Judith.
Yeah, I love Judith Hill. She is remarkable. So there are lots of women organizations that kind of focus on the feminine aspect. So names that include, lipstick and high heels and pink, lots of pinks and reds and stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. But I wanted to focus more on our business acumen. And bringing together all the lived experiences which create the BrainTrust and calling it the BrainTrust instead of something that was more feminine.
I like that.
And I love it. I'm really proud of our name and our brand.
What I like about it is I do think it is very gender neutral in the approach, which I think has actually got a lot of advantages.
Over the past 4 years, has it been successful? Sounds like yes. And how do you, as an organization, measure kind of success?
Is it all EBITDA?
Well, it's not all EBITDA. So my goal is not. There's some women whose businesses can never reach $1 million. It's just not possible with their model. But if we can help her get from 150 a year to 500 a year, that's game changing for her and her family. And then there are quite a few of them who do have scalable businesses, or they can just shift the model just a little bit to start scaling. And so I measure success by how many of our members are able to reach their own financial goals. And, one of those stories is a woman who joined, and she told me the first day, I don't care about getting to $1 million. And then I said, so why did you join and what is your goal? And she said, I have to earn enough money so my husband can quit his job. She said, corporate America is killing him. It is it's robbing him of his soul. And she'd been in business 30 years. 10 years revenue had been flat. Her husband retired 8 months after she joined BrainTrust because her group, and we call our groups vaults. Each group of 7 women is called a vault because a vault holds great value and it is a safe place. Mm-hmm. And her vault just helped her see that she was doing too many things, that she had multiple lines of revenue, but only one that she loved, and it happened to be the one that was most profitable. And they said, forget about those other things, and helped her see that she needed to focus on that one. And so now she has a hard time keeping up with the demand for her business. So she's got a few employees now, and it was just them sharing their experiences, helping her see what was possible for her. So she won't have $1 million business probably, but she could probably get to $500,000 or $600,000 a year, which is enough for her and her family to fulfill their goals. And then we have some members who will be billionaires. We have members who are doing absolutely revolutionary things, who will be outrageously successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's go. Okay, so if you had an 18-year-old daughter who was, considering a future career, maybe thinking about college, maybe not. What advice would you give her?
Just to be true to herself and not to try to live for her parents and what they want for her, but to dig deep and see what she wants.
Because you were able to release that from your parents. And I think that is, I think almost you were an entrepreneur, destined to be an entrepreneur, because I think that spirit of sort of being true to yourself, going your own way, not that you can't be true to yourself and be employed by someone else, but I think almost you need to have some of that to be an entrepreneur. And so looking back in hindsight, it's pretty easy to see that spirit was already there in you.
Yeah, it was. And I've never really had a passion for printing and mailing hospital bills. I mean, that is not a very exciting business, but I had passion for people. And so I could parlay that into, really, I could use that in any business. So that was at my core, is just loving people and seeing that they're cared for.
And yeah, I think that's interesting, because what I heard come through was, which I think we know all too well, is like not letting people down. I felt when you were telling that story that you were going out to people, you were selling them a product, it wasn't being delivered, and therefore it was your reputation, and you were letting them down, and you needed to make that right.
Yeah, I could see how our failure was affecting their businesses, which ultimately would affect their families. And that killed me.
Do you think, I do think this is really interesting. I look back at some of my experiences, similar to cleaning toilets, although not gas station toilets. So you definitely have me beat on that. And I think sometimes that's where the grit came from to get through the things today. So I do think, at least from my perspective, interesting to see what you think. But I think one of the things that's hard about being a parent right now is that we want to save our kids from so many things. But if I hadn't started working those terrible jobs at a very young age and pushing through it, I don't know that I would be in the same place that I am today.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I'm grateful for those experiences. I'm grateful for the hard times. Really the first 2 years in Nashville were really, really hard. And I'm so grateful because that kind of shaped and informed. I was already pretty empathetic, but it really fed that empathy bone that I had. I remember asking Lucius after the sale why he had invested in me. And I found out I was the only woman-owned business that he had invested in. And he said, because I was scrappy. And the scrappiness came from, having to be. And
necessity is a great motivator.
Yeah, it is. And I think I'm more aware of it now with my grandchildren, not robbing them of the opportunity to make it on their own, and the sense of pride and self-respect that you get when you make it on your own the hard way.
And do you have any lessons? I think something too a lot of us can relate to is you had that background. I think probably was a huge part of your motivation. Second generation, third generation, especially kids. They have especially if you have been successful, they have a very different life and a very different experience, which they may not be super motivated to escape. They may be, very content. So, do you have any advice for you? I'm sure you've seen that in your life as well. Like once you've seen a generation sort of make it and succeed, how do you pass that kind of grit and passion along to the next generation?
I think my daughter got it naturally because she, as a little girl, still in a playpen, I had to take her with me when I was cleaning. And so, she watched all that. Her first toys that she wanted a broom and a mop, and she wanted a little toy vacuum and stuff like that she wanted to clean. And so I think that work ethic she got naturally. She saw it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the next. How do you help the next generation? So if you had like you're talking about with your granddaughters, if you're raising, I guess you mentioned that you were raising one of your granddaughters at one point. How are you keeping that relationship that grounded, balanced?
by not helping too much, a realization that helping them too much doesn't really help them. And I've gotten that through a lot of counseling, because it was my first instinct to give them all the things that I didn't have and to make it easy so they didn't have to work the way I had to work. But there's such a sense of pride that comes from work. Doing it yourself, yeah. Yes, and doing it yourself. So I want to instill that in them. And my oldest granddaughter is 22 and is doing great and has the work ethic and has the passion for what she's doing. Yeah. I'm anxious to see how the other two granddaughters do too. I've got another one who's 10 and one who's 2 soon.
No. So, okay. So I'm interested in that 2016 to 2019 period between the sale of Letter Logic and, starting BrainTrust. Any big celebrations, really what am I going to do with my life? Like, what was that period like for you? I think as entrepreneurs, when we think about selling our company, it's like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Yes, I could use a change. That sounds like a really good time to have some money. And then oh no, who am I now?
There is definitely a sense of a loss of identity, which I wasn't prepared for. I was prepared for all the financial implications. I wasn't prepared for the emotional. And so it was like I lost my baby. I gave my baby away. Mm-hmm. And there was that. I went back to the company a few times to visit, and I could get up to the lobby. You would walk into a door, up 5 steps and into the lobby. And I got to that top step twice and couldn't go any further. I was crying too much and left. So I wasn't prepared for that, but I did something that I wouldn't recommend, which was thought, I'm going to have all this free time. I'll start mentoring. I'll help all these other people. And I was on several boards, too much. And so I never really got a break. I got really no sense of time off between selling the company until I was officially starting the other. And the whole time I was planning BrainTrust and how I would do it and setting it up. And I was writing my book. And writing a book takes a lot of time. Yeah. So I never really had any lag time. So I would recommend for people, when you sell your company, do nothing for a year. There's a mourning period, and just take time to think about what you really want to do versus just taking on so much that now you're obligated and you've got to keep up.
Yeah, just to fill up the time. Yeah, I think as business people, we're scared of that downtime. Mm-hmm. We're scared to embrace it because I reference it a lot, but there's a Sturgill Simpson line that says, we serve up distractions and we eat them with fries. It's much easier to tackle the emails or the distractions than to deal with what the downtime may bring.
Yeah.
So we know that you're, just getting started. BrainTrust is still it's the new baby, but what is sort of your big, hairy, audacious goals at this point in your life, if any?
My BHAG is definitely 10xing BrainTrust. Because I can see, as our goal to help more women reach financial independence and end generational poverty and to create generational wealth through women. There's so much work to be done, and I'm so excited about it. So my goal is to 10x and then 10x and then to 10x BrainTrust so that it impacts more women and more communities. There's this old saying that if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. But if you teach him to fish, he eats for a lifetime. But if you teach a woman how to fish, she feeds the village for a lifetime. And I think the ripple effect that women entrepreneurs have on communities and on the global economy is phenomenal. And I want to be part of that. And this is probably the most important work I've ever done. And very, very satisfying.
It definitely feels like fun and legacy work, which is amazing. Okay, so some lightning round questions. I don't know if you hung posters in your locker when you were a kid. However, imagine that you did. Who was in your locker?
Oh, I did. Chris Christopherson of Barbra Streisand.
Chris Christopherson.
I loved Barbara Streisand, and then they were in the movie A Star Is Born.
And she has a new book out. I saw just came out.
Oh.
My name is Barbara.
I love her, but he was also my crush. Now it's Ryan Gosling, but at the time it was Chris Christopherson.
Right.
I still haven't grown up.
She's still putting the posters up.
Yeah.
Maybe we should,
Yeah, one thing about Christopherson, he moved to Nashville. He was a Rhodes Scholar, moved to Nashville. His job was literally, he was the janitor at a music studio.
Yes.
That's how he started.
Yeah, that's what he and I have in common.
Right. So reach out. A personal hero.
There's so many. I think Madeleine Albright, and I got to sort of meet her a few years ago, which was phenomenal. Anybody who's standing up for justice and what's right. Mm-hmm. I was with the founder of Kind Bars a few weeks ago, and he was talking about the difference in being kind and being nice, and that nice is not being a bully. Kind is when you see acts of bullying and you do something about it. So my heroes are people who are taking action and doing the hard stuff to stop all of the inequities and inequalities in our society, which there are a lot.
Yeah. Agreed. The best piece of advice you've ever been given, or just a good piece that you can remember?
I think I have to go back to Brad Stevens, who said, major in the majors, and especially as I am encouraging entrepreneurs and helping entrepreneurs grow their business, to focus on one thing, find out what your unique ability is and how you can use that to grow your business, and focus on that and not on all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Your favorite way to get from stress to relax?
Walking. I walk at least 5 miles a day, and that has health benefits, but also really good for my mental state.
Yeah. Do you walk neighborhood, or do you get out into parks? And
no, I like to walk the neighborhoods. My husband likes to walk the parks, but this is a little embarrassing, and I'm also afraid to share this with y'all because you might be out there doing the same thing. But I try to find money every day. So I walk the routes and try to see how much money I can find. So yesterday I only found 8 cents, but I compete with my friend Du Tenon to see who can find the most money. I walked with her yesterday, and she got down and got the money quicker than I could. So I think she got like 40 cents, and I got a total of 8. But that's what motivates me to get out every day, to see I've got to get out and find the money before other people do.
Yeah. And
you don't find money in the parks. You find it on the streets and sidewalks.
I like that. Also probably a good way to instill grit in our children and grandchildren, to still look at the small
stuff.
Pick up the pennies.
I did it with my younger daughter for a while, my younger granddaughter, and we would come back and create a log every day of how much money we found. And the first year she and I did it together, we found $101.56.
Pretty good.
I know.
Pretty good. I had a friend a long time ago, and he would always say, it's like the pennies, like not on heads. It's not like you don't pick it up. He's like, I'm a penny richer. I'm picking it up. Like, this is the craziest thing I've heard.
I pick it up. That's probably how I'm going to die, getting hit by a bus as I run to get a dime out of the street.
Well, everybody listening will be much more aware when they're walking now, for sure.
Don't come to my neighborhood. Stay away from Hillsborough Village.
Stay away from Hillsborough Village. Okay, besides Lunch with Lucy, or 10X instead of 2X, the book that you mentioned, is there another favorite book that everyone should read?
Yeah, if you're running a company and you have more than a handful of employees, I think The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is one of my favorite books. And Ego is the Enemy. I need to go read that again today, probably. The man who wrote 10X is Easier Than 2X also wrote Who, Not How, and The Gap versus Gain. Mm-hmm. And all of those are amazingly good business books with real practical advice that you can put into place today.
Yeah, I love those books.
Yeah, so we always like to ask, who should we do this with next? The theme of the podcast, which is kind of an outgrowth of our book, is, the people kind of writing Nashville's next chapter who are interesting.
I don't think there's anybody more interesting than my husband, Mark Deutschmann. I mean, that's why I married him. He was a marine zoologist who shipwrecked on a little island in British Columbia. He was up working with killer whales and shipwrecked. And that's what brought him to Nashville in a long way. Isn't that an interesting story? Yeah. And when we were first dating, I ran into a man one day who was kind of hitting on me. And I said, that man I'm with my boyfriend is, Mark Deutschmann. He said, Mark Deutschmann, he reshaped Nashville. I'm like, yeah, he did. He reshaped me. And I think he's had an incredible impact on the real estate, but also the development of walkable communities. His passion is the Greenway system and expanding it.
My first house was at the Exchange Lofts, which was the first conversion project downtown, which was one of Mark's. I think that and Worthen were kind of, came along at the same time. Yeah. So that's when I first met Mark a long time ago.
I think he's an interesting man.
Well, just one final bonus question, just out of curiosity, is what's the best thing about your relationship with Mark? Why does it work so well?
Because he is like the kindest man in the world. He's so kind and thoughtful, and he's kind with everybody. And both of us, we're entrepreneurs. And so we talk about business a lot. So it's that common interest that was really our love language.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of Climbing the Charts. And we look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thank you for having me.